Special Agent Robert Hanssen was a spy inside the FBI. He was a double agent who spied for the Soviet Union and Russia for over 20 years. People were literally executed because of his treason, which has been called the worst intelligence spy disaster in U.S. history. For 22 years, Agent Hanssen sold America's secrets to Moscow, sending agents that helped the U.S. to their deaths in a dark basement under a Russian prison. This isn't a movie. This really happened. Then dramatically, in 2001, he was caught red-handed at a drop zone while handing over secrets to Russia. But get this, the FBI man who caught him, who led the most famous internal insider treason case in American history, when he pulled this off back in 2001, that FBI agent wasn't a seasoned or grizzled agent or some type of Hollywood hero. He was a 26-year-old rookie agent operating with codename Werewolf or Ghost, who worked this dangerous mission to uncover the truth for the American people. That person is Eric O'Neill. And we are very lucky and excited that he sits down with us next week for an exclusive interview to discuss that case, as well as his new book, which I encourage you to get, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. We cover the same tactics of betrayal and espionage that are fueling social engineering and cybercrime today. And we show you exactly how you can protect yourself and your family, your loved ones, and your organization. So watch for our exclusive interview with Eric O'Neill coming up next week. But today, we bring you behind the scenes for the story behind next week's episode. The story of treason and espionage involving Robert Hanssen. Coming up right now in this episode. So hang out and check this out. It's good. It's really good. Subscribe now. You won't ever see truth the same way again. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. What if the most dangerous spy in American history wasn't some foreign agent, but a church-going FBI veteran? The guy who taught other agents how to catch spies. And what if the person that brought him down finally was only a 26-year-old undercover operative pretending to be his protege? That's the true story of Robert Hanssen, the FBI agent who caused the worst intelligence crisis in U.S. history. And Eric O'Neill, the man who lived inside the cage with him. As we mentioned, Eric O'Neill is on our show for an exclusive interview next week. This is the story that leads up to that. And here's some things that I want to bring to your attention before I walk you through the whole story. Hanssen, the director who committed these treasonous crimes, which led to the execution of Americans and people that were serving the United States. He once asked Eric's wife to join his church group. Think about that for a second. That's part of how he blended mentorship with manipulation. So why did he do this? What was his motive? Well, it's complicated. This isn't a Greek tragedy where one character is all evil or all good. Even though Hanssen made huge amounts of money from committing this treason and selling secrets to Russia, cash, diamonds, you name it, his motivation had layers. It was largely driven by ego, by feeling untouchable, perhaps wanting to feel immortal by outsmarting the system. Eric O'Neill once said, "It was the thing that made him feel that he was the best at something in the world." By the end, the FBI had an office space for Hanssen, but it was outfitted with surveillance cameras and microphones 24/7, 365. And they built a massive internal operation. Around 300 personnel monitoring him by early 2001 when it all came down. Eric Hanssen's code name in the FBI's internal hunt, the target, Eric Hanssen, was called Gray Suit. Eric O'Neill, the one who brought him down, his alias, at least among operatives at the time, was Werewolf. He's also been called Ghost. So why this matters and why we need to pay attention to this. This case is a template for insider threat, for long-term espionage, and the human factor in cybersecurity. It fits perfectly in what we talk about in cybercrime and raising awareness. The dynamic between Hanssen, the spy inside, and O'Neill, the operative inside the cage, is dramatic. Loyalty, betrayal, risk, secrecy. There's direct parallels to today's threats. Malicious insiders, nation-state cyber espionage, data exfiltration. Exfiltration, fancy word for steal, right? Taking sensitive data, money, you name it. And it all boils down to the human layer. This real-world story gives us all a behind-the-scenes look at what security consulting and counter-espionage really involves, not just theory. So let's start at the beginning. The spy among us. Robert Hanssen was the kind of agent you'd never suspect. He was quiet. He was conservative. And by all accounts, brilliant. He had a corner office in the FBI. He wore a cross on his neck. And he held secrets and sold them worth millions. For over 22 years, Hanssen sold America's deepest intelligence to the Soviet Union. And then when the USSR collapsed and it became Russia, he continued on and sold it to Russia. He gave up spy networks, nuclear defense plans. Think about that for a second. He even gave up the names of double agents, people that were over in the Soviet Union and in Russia helping the United States. Many of those were executed because of what Hanssen did. And as we talked about, he wasn't just even driven by greed. He wanted to win, to outsmart the system he thought had overlooked him. The FBI called it one of the worst intelligence breaches in U.S. history. So to catch him, they brought in the Ghost, Werewolf. Enter Eric O'Neill, a young FBI ghost trained in surveillance but never told the full mission. They told him he'd be working for Hanssen in a new cybersecurity division called Information Assurance. In reality, he was there to watch him. Every word, every move, every strange keystroke on the keyboard. Imagine sitting across the man you know is betraying your country and getting people executed and risking nuclear war and pretending he's your mentor. Knowing one wrong look could blow the whole case. Hanssen even once turned to him mid-conversation and said, "You know, Eric, the FBI is full of traitors. You just have to look hard enough." Let that sink in. That line wasn't a metaphor. It was a warning. The climax came down to one risky moment. Hanssen had left his PalmPilot. PalmPilot was like the early smartphone. Had a little pen. We all used it back in the day. Anybody that's over 40 will remember them. While Hanssen left his PalmPilot, the device he used to record encrypted secrets, and he left it unattended for just a moment. O'Neill made a split-second call. He grabbed it, rushed it to the tech team. They cloned the data while he stalled Hanssen with casual conversation. Minutes ticked by. Then, unexpectedly, Hanssen returned. Eric handed the device back, heart pounding, palms sweating, not knowing if he'd given away the operation. That cloned data became the smoking gun that finally exposed Hanssen. 2 weeks later, the FBI arrested Hanssen at a dead drop zone in a Virginia park. We've got a picture of it. We'll show it on the video. He was caught leaving a final package under a wooden footbridge. Inside of that package, stolen documents, cash, and betrayal worth billions. That story has become legend. Hollywood even turned this into a movie called Breach. But Eric O'Neill didn't stop there. In his new book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, he shows how these same spy tactics, deception, manipulation, social engineering, have evolved into today's digital espionage. The new spies aren't in trench coats. They're in hoodies, Slack channels, and AI models. And they're not just after governments anymore. They're after you. Eric O'Neill warns that cybercrime has grown into the third largest economy on Earth. We've talked about that routinely on this show. There's the US, China, and then cybercrime. It has surpassed the international drug trade, which most people think makes so much money. It surpassed that 6 years ago. The most common breach is still caused by humans. Not malware, not ransomware, mindware. The same confidence tricks that Hanssen used to hide for decades are the same tactics attackers use today to get you to click, share, or trust the wrong thing. Robert Hanssen didn't just steal files. He also stole lives. When he fed U.S. intelligence secrets to the Soviet Union, he exposed way more than nuclear secrets and strategies. He exposed humans. American assets working deep inside Moscow. Men and women who risked everything to pass information that protected the free world. Names that were supposed to stay locked in the most classified vaults of the headquarters of the FBI. They all ended up in the hands of the KGB. Neatly typed, cross-referenced, and friggin' gift-wrapped by one of our own FBI agents. Between 1985 and 1991, at least 3 confirmed people, double agents working on behalf of the free world in the United States, were arrested, tortured, and executed because of what Hanssen did. One of them was Adolf Tolkachev, a Soviet engineer who secretly handed over radar blueprints that gave the U.S. an edge in aerial combat. The KGB even called him the billion-dollar spy. Hanssen's leaks helped identify him. They shot him in a Moscow basement. They shot him in a Moscow basement because of information that Robert Hanssen handed them. Think about that. That's the line the history books give us. They shot him in a Moscow basement. Short, clinical, detached. But what really happened is a lesson in how silence can scream. Adolf Tolkachev wasn't some shadowy figure out of a spy model. He was an engineer. He was an introvert. He was a man who spent his life designing radar systems for the Soviet Air Force. And one day he decided to turn against the machine he had helped build. For nearly a decade, Tolkachev fed the US CIA documents that changed the balance of power in the Cold War. His blueprints gave American pilots an invisible edge, the kind of data that saves lives. He hid notes inside car parts, film canisters, even children's books. He met agents in back alleys under the cover of fog, passed microfilm through cracked car windows, and went home to his wife pretending nothing happened. He knew what the stakes were, but he wanted to see the world free. He once told his CIA handler, "If I'm caught, I will not survive the day, but freedom is worth the risk." If I'm caught, I will not survive the day, but freedom is worth the risk. And for years, he was right. No one caught him, not until Robert Hanssen and his betrayal reached across the world. When Hanssen sold out American double agents, he gave Moscow a map. He didn't just hand him a name. He cross-referenced everything. And the KGB moved fast. They arrested Tolkachev, dragged him to a Lubyanka prison, and broke him under interrogation. They wanted to make an example of him, and they did. Down in a concrete basement under a single buzzing light, they lined him up against a wall. No ceremony, no trial, no lawyer, just a shot.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Most business leaders have a fatal flaw which results in their growth being interrupted or stopped terminally. They ignore the mountain they're about to crash into, distracted by the focus on revenue growth. Until it's too late. Don't become another fatal business statistic. Keep your cybersecurity modern so you can grow without interruption. Stay competitive. Get NetGain. Stay focused on your growth and funding. While NetGain keeps your technology always available with expert-level cybersecurity services to stop breaches in their tracks, all at a fraction of the cost of managing it yourself. Don't wait for a technology disaster to interrupt and cripple your growth. Speak with a specialist today. Contact NetGain Technologies today at 844-777-6278 or reach out online at netgainit.com. That's 844-777-6278 and netgainit.com. Grow your business uninterrupted. Contact NetGain today.
And then nothing. His wife wasn't even told for years. The CIA only learned of his fate through whispers, smuggled out on scraps of rumors. In their FBI headquarters, the analysts who worked with him, who trusted that network, they just sat with stunned silence. One of them later said it felt like watching a friend disappear into static. All because one man in the FBI wanted to feel special. wanted to prove that he was smarter than everyone else. Robert Hanssen's treason didn't end with stolen files. It ended in that Moscow basement with the echo of a gunshot that no one in Washington could ever unhear. This is why Eric O'Neill's story matters. Because when you've seen what betrayal really costs, you spend the rest of your life hunting for the next one before it fires the next shot. But it didn't end with him. Another was Valery Martinov, an officer of the Soviet Foreign Intelligence Service, who fed the FBI details of Russian operations. Vanished after Hanssen's reports reached Moscow. So did Sergei Motorin, another double agent. Both were executed without trial, without due process, without attorneys, without any say. Inside U.S. intelligence, those deaths hit like thunder. Every analyst, every field operative, every handler started to wonder who the heck gave them up. Because for years, they had led to the saving of so many innocent lives. They had done good work for free people. So for years, the Bureau hunted phantoms. They suspected CIA officer Aldrich Ames, and he was a traitor. But even after Ames was caught, agents kept dying. Someone else was leaking. That someone was still sitting inside an FBI office, gaining a fat paycheck, getting a great pension, attending Catholic Mass on Sundays, heading up church groups, wearing a tie, telling his coworkers to be vigilant against internal threats. Let's talk about the others who never came home. Tolkachev wasn't the only one. When Robert Hanssen sold out American assets, he handed over a death schedule. When we think of Valery and Sergei, both of those officers were in Soviet intelligence. And they had quietly chosen a side, the side of freedom. Not a king, not an oppressor, not a totalitarian regime. Yeah, they were double agents, but they were feeding the FBI precious details about Soviet operations, embassy communications, and subtle movements of spies in Washington and Moscow alike. For years, their information saved lives. It helped unmask Soviet illegals, dismantle spy rings, and the steady, delicate chess game of the Cold War. And then their luck ran out because they didn't do anything, not because they slept, not because they talked, but because one of our own, Robert Hanssen, sold their lives for cash, diamonds, most importantly, ego, fragile ego. In 1985, the KGB came for both of them. They arrived without warning, black Volgas pulling up outside their apartment in the gray hours before dawn. The streets were quiet. The snow was still falling because it always freaking snows there. Neighbors later said that it didn't sound like an arrest. It sounded like a disappearance. Valery Martinov was taken first. They blindfolded him, bound his hands, and dragged him to Lubyanka prison. The same fortress of silence where countless others had vanished. And for months, no word, no trial, no news, no official record of his name. Sergei Motorin followed, a young officer, sharp, careful, convinced he'd been cautious enough to avoid suspicion. He wasn't. The KGB already had his file thanks to Robert Hanssen. Inside Lubyanka, interrogation meant erosion. Sleep deprivation, waterboarding, isolation, electrical torture. They wanted confessions, but they didn't even need them. They already had the truth in an FBI folder hand-delivered through betrayal. By winter's end that year, both men were executed. Shot in the head, buried in unmarked graves behind prison walls. Their families were told nothing. Their names were erased from official records, just two ghosts in a system built on secrets. In Washington, analysts started to piece it all together slowly because encrypted cables had gone silent, messages, dead drops stayed empty, and one by one the reports stopped coming in. But they didn't know then that Hanssen's treachery had already reached oceans and ended two more lives. The Soviets called it justice. The FBI called it a nightmare. And for the families of those two men, it was simply gone. And this is where Eric O'Neill's story begins. Eric once said that understanding Hanssen wasn't about chasing codes or surveillance or secrets. It was about confronting what betrayal looks like when it wears a suit and tie, attends church on Sunday, comes to your house, speaks with your wife, and wears a wedding ring. Martinov and Motorin were proof. Espionage isn't glamorous. It's cold. It's quiet. And it leaves no one clean. That's the real cost of the Hanssen case. Not the data, not the headlines, but the men whose names faded in the snow behind the prison outside Moscow. So this is where Eric O'Neill's story begins, in the long shadow left by men like Martinov, Motorin, and Tolkachev, ghosts whose deaths haunted every hallway inside the FBI. Fast forward to the 1990s, whispers of a double agent or a mole inside the bureau were still echoing in FBI offices. A traitor had been bleeding secrets for decades, and no one could figure out who. Every failure, every dead agent, every compromised mission, they all led back to a single individual thread. And the thread ended at Robert Hanssen. But to catch him, they couldn't rely on forensics or wiretaps. Hanssen was way too careful, too paranoid, too brilliant. He knew every surveillance trick in the book. He wrote half of them. So the FBI turned to something more dangerous. A young, untested operative who could get close enough to make Hanssen believed he'd found a protege. To feed the very thing that was motivating him, to feed his ego, to make him feel special. It's why he endangered the United States and got people killed, so that he could feel special. Someone who admired him, trusted him, maybe even feared him. And that operative was Eric O'Neill. Officially, he was assigned to work for Hanssen in this newly created cybersecurity unit, a dull, bureaucratic department called Information Assurance. But the job wasn't paperwork, it was proximity. Eric's real mission, to live beside the mole, study him, and quietly dismantle his illusion of safety. He wasn't given a gun. He wasn't given anything other than time and a cover story. Imagine sitting across the man who sold out your country, who'd sent fellow agents to their deaths in basements you can still hear echoing in your mind, and pretending he's your mentor. Eric Hanssen was brilliant, paranoid, manipulative, a spider in a web of his own making. And Eric O'Neill had to step into that web without getting caught. Every day was psychological warfare. The coded conversations, the sudden mood swings, the veiled religious guilt, the casual contempt for the bureau he'd betrayed. Underneath it all, that constant hum of danger, the knowledge that if Hanssen ever suspected, it wouldn't end with an arrest. It could end with the loss of Eric's life. What unfolded next would become one of the most extraordinary takedowns in FBI history. A battle of wits, fought not in dark alleys but across cubicles, coffee breaks, and quiet office corridors. The ghosts of Marodov, Motorin, and Tolkachev were still whispering in those walls. But this time, someone was listening, and that was Eric O'Neill. For weeks and months, it went on and on, this delicate dance. Eric lived inside the cage with the mole. Hanssen trusted him, tested him, and toyed with him. Every move felt like chess against a grandmaster who'd already knew the endgame. But Eric was patient. He watched. He logged every file Hanssen printed, every document he hid, every strange code name he muttered under his breath. And then came the opening. Hanssen had a handheld PalmPilot, early day smart device, a personal digital diary. And in it were encrypted notes, lists, drop schedules, and dead drop coordinates. Well, the FBI needed it. But Hanssen never left it out of his sight until one day in 2001. He left his office just for a quick meeting. The device sat on his desk. Black and silver, ordinary, harmless looking. O'Neill's handler whispered through his earpiece, "This is it, you've got 5 minutes." Eric moved fast. He grabbed the PalmPilot, ran it down the corridor into a waiting tech room disguised as IT support. They hooked it up, cloned its data, and worked in complete silence, the kind of silence that feels loud in your chest. Then footsteps. Hanssen was friggin' coming back early. O'Neill's pulse spiked. He looked down the hallway. No time to finish. He snatched the device, slipped it into his pocket, and rushed back into the office. Hanssen threw open the door just as Eric sat down, pretending to read a file. The PalmPilot was still warm in his hand. "Everything all right, Eric?" Hanssen asked. "Yes, sir. Just catching up on the briefing," Eric replied. Hanssen nodded, eyes searching, suspicious, then sat oblivious, tapping on the same device that now carried his own confession. That cloned data exposed years of betrayal. The files, the payments, the dead drops in Virginia parks, the code names Ramon and B. It was the evidence the FBI had waited decades for. Then, weeks later, finally, February 18th, 2001, in Vienna, Virginia, Hanssen walked across a park, toward a wooden footbridge, carrying a plastic bag filled with stolen classified documents. He crouched down to place it beneath a wooden bridge, but it turned out to be his final dead drop. Agents swarmed in. FBI bands screeched up to the path. Federal agents, don't move. Guns drawn. Hanssen froze, and then he said, "What took you so long?" 22 years of betrayal ended in 12 seconds. When Eric O'Neill finally heard the words, "We got him," he didn't celebrate. He exhaled. Because it wasn't triumph, it was relief. The kind that only comes after standing face to face with evil for way too long. The ghosts of Martinov, Motorin, and Tolkachev finally had their reckoning, and the man who gave them away was in handcuffs. After his arrest in 2001, when Hanssen's identity finally surfaced, it wasn't relief, it was grief. Because his treachery had already erased an entire generation of human beings. People whose families never even got to bury them. Eric O'Neill once wrote that Hanssen's true weapon wasn't even technology. It was trust. The same trust used today in cybercrime. He used his reputation, his piety, his religious guilt, his psychological manipulation, and his calm demeanor as camouflage. He turned belief itself into a tool of espionage, and the result was blood. That's what makes Eric's story so haunting. He wasn't chasing a hacker in a hoodie, he was chasing the man next door. The one who looked like the hero. When the cuffs clinked shut on Robert Hanssen, the FBI didn't just close a case, it closed a wound. For those 2 decades, he'd been bleeding secrets to Moscow, feeding our enemies information that cost lives, wrecked trust, and shattered families. And the lesson left behind wasn't about technology. It's about human nature. He didn't hack firewalls, he hacked faith. He weaponized the one vulnerability that no system can patch, and that's trust. Inside the Bureau, that realization hit harder than any arrest because they finally saw it. The enemy doesn't always knock from the outside. Sometimes they already have the keys. The truth stayed with Eric O'Neill long after the cameras and the case files faded. He'd stared into the eyes of betrayal and lived to tell the story. But he also saw something deeper. The same tactics of manipulation and deceit Hanssen used behind closed doors were now being reborn in cyberspace. Where spies who once carried briefcases now carry code, made phone calls, used social media DMs to do the exact same thing. Where dead drops were hidden under footbridges, they now live in encrypted servers and chat logs. And the people being targeted aren't secret agents. They're your employees, executives, students, elderly, romantic partners, and families. Cybercrime isn't a SaaS program. It's not a tool. It's an economy. The 3rd largest on Earth. Built on stolen trust and human error. That's why Eric wrote his new book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, to show the world that the same psychological trap used by Cold War spies are now being weaponized against every single one of us. Every time we get online, we enter their world. Eric calls it PAID. Prepare, assess, investigate, and decide. PAID. A framework for fighting deception, not just online, but everywhere. Because espionage never ends. It's just changed its format. Next week, we sit down with Eric O'Neill himself, the man who caught America's most dangerous spy, to go a little bit inside this story, but also to unpack how modern espionage works, and to learn how to protect ourselves from the same tactics that Hanssen used to betray a nation. If you think this story ended in 2001, think again. Spies never retire. They just log in. This is Cybercrime Junkies. Subscribe, turn on alerts, stay vigilant. Because when Eric O'Neill joins us next week, you'll see exactly how one spy's betrayal still echoes through every breach, every phishing link, and every insider threat today. Trust me, you won't look at your inbox the same way again. Thanks for listening. Do us a favor and subscribe. See you next week.
Catch us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn, and dive deeper at cybercrimejunkies.com. Don't just watch, be the type of person that fights back. This is Cybercrime Junkies. And now the show.